Professor Davies, welcome back from last week,
Welcome.
from our first
Thank you for
episode.
your welcome, yes.
And you are as ready as always. And it's nice because last time we were catching up, there was still daylight, but now it's
Now,
we are back from work. At least I am back
what
from
time
work.
are we? 5:30 in the evening. Teaching
Yeah.
is finished for the day, and we're now
Yeah,
back.
so you taught today in Cambridge, I
I
suppose.
taught in the morning in the dissecting room, and I was working on a book chapter this afternoon.
Fantastic. Just to let you know, the second edition of my book, where you gave a very nice testimony, that is also coming up. So and this time, because the first time we had this book, I could not publicize it because it came up. So the book was published, and within a couple of months there was pandemic. So we got into shutdown. So fortunately, this time probably I will have way more opportunities to publicize it and to reach a bigger audience with nanomedicine. But that actually already works as a pivotal point when I will try to discuss today, because last time I discussed about kind of your evolution as an anatomist, how you started. You have seen the olden days and probably golden days of anatomy.
Well, for some things.
For some things you have seen a lot. In this session, I'll come back to more contemporary times, say in last 5 years, 10 years, as long as I have known you. Let's put it like that, over something like a decade. There are a couple of things I would like to take I would like to collect your pearls of wisdom. The first thing is, there is a feeling, and that's the elephant in the room, probably no one talks about, but I would like to say that there is a feeling that being an anatomist is not that rewarding a career anymore. What do you think? Is it so? And if yes, why?
Where I want to start with this is what being an anatomist means at the moment.
Yeah.
When I started as an anatomist, after doing some postdocs and things like that, everybody in the department that I started in as an anatomist was doing teaching and research. Some people were doing more of one than the other. And with time, it changed. The head of the department was not as active as he was before I came, because he was the head of the department. He had much more admin and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But he had done it. Now, I think that it's been a serious mistake to separate the research from teaching. Teaching only positions, I just don't see how they can be called university academic positions if that's all the person is doing. Where is the development of the subject that you would expect in a university?
And do you think teaching makes somebody a better researcher as well?
I think it does. Even for the simple thing that as an anatomist, we end up teaching the whole body, usually, at least we used to. So that in the Anatomical Society meetings 30 years ago, people would sit through the whole 3 days and know something about the part of the body that the research was on. And now you find people saying, well, I only work on X, so I won't go to any of the other sessions. So you had some feeling for it. And of course, almost always learned something. And then that could be employed in your teaching. And
I guess
comparative anatomy as well. It's amazing how often that is, I can use that in teaching.
Yes.
Teaching head and neck up until Christmas. And one of the things you do about the air sinuses, why? Well, the fact that I've worked on birds, you know that lots of their bones have air pockets within them. And then you think back to physics, a tube of the same weight of metal is stronger than a rod. and it makes them lighter. So that, you can say we don't know why the head has them, but it's on top of the body. It's heavy. If you've ever had a disc problem in your neck, which I have, trying to lift your head is quite difficult. And then all of the problems that people have with their maxillary sinuses if they don't drain. And the students are asking, why is it that at the top of the sinus? Well, if we're on all fours and you are feeding on the ground, it wouldn't be at the top of the sinus.
Yeah.
All of these things feed into what we do with human anatomy on a daily basis.
And I do think, because we have worked a lot and we agree a lot of things, that probably this segregation or separation of human anatomy from veterinary anatomy and zoological knowledge, I mean, because I think we both agree that One Health approach, where you don't take just human and non-human species, but you take it as a part of a bigger cohort, probably cohort of vertebrates, probably that is.
Absolutely. I mean, the first professor of anatomy in Cambridge was a professor of comparative anatomy in the zoology department. The fact that he was medically trained and a clinical anatomist as well was neither here nor there. It was the same thing. And in fact, this morning, I've just remember, it's a long time ago now, this morning, we were doing the anterior abdominal wall. And
so all the oblique muscles.
Yeah, but that's what I wasn't talking about. It's the rectus sheath. Why do you need a rectus sheath? Why do you need the tendinous intersections? Well, if you're on all fours, they help to support the abdominal contents without muscular effort. And still, all know the six-pack, and they think we use the rectus muscles to flex the trunk. So I asked students to bend over, hold it for a couple of minutes, and tell me which muscles were acting. And of course, the bright one said, "Oh, my back hurts. It must be the erector spinae group." And what are they doing? They're acting against gravity. We very rarely need to curl up in a ball. If we lean forward, we let gravity do it and stop it.
Yes. So all these muscles have logic. They are not just a kind of just emerging out of nothing. There were reasons, and probably many of these reasons are not very clear to us, but there has to be reasons in the evolutionary trajectory of vertebrate anatomy to evolve.
And you can't prove it, but why is there no posterior part of the sheath between the pelvic brim and halfway towards the umbilicus, which causes quite a lot of problems in old age with hernias? But if you look at a greyhound, for example, that part of the sheath it's not carrying the weight of the abdominal or thoracic contents, that more anterior. I was going to say higher, but they're not. They're more anterior parts.
Yes. So there are certainly logics of weight bearing and locomotion and holding on the abdominal contents. Absolutely. That has definitely contributed. We don't know how and when, maybe millions of years back. But I mean, this is remarkable because I teach a lot of embryology within my own scope as an anatomy lecturer in UCD. And for example, the embryology slides, and especially if you look into the illustrations of embryos of different vertebrate species, I'll not go into Ernst Haeckel and everything. Maybe he might come over that ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny and everything. Yeah. I will not. That's a different topic. Maybe someday we can do it in future. But there are remarkable similarities, at least externally. It's the same flexed out embryos that are coming together. And that makes me believe that why are we teaching embryology separately in human medicine and veterinary medicine? Because we can put them together. It will decrease our workload. We can, and probably be more effective and more interesting, because students can interact and they can understand that this is not something unique to humans or unique to dogs. It's kind of more homogeneous template, which belongs to the entire this cohort of vertebrates?
I was taught by pig embryos,
yes,
not human embryos. I mean, the lectures were about humans, but the slides we used to look at ourselves were pig embryos. And to be honest, at that stage, I couldn't tell the difference between those. And
no, but in fact, there are diagrams.
No,
even the students cannot, and understandably so. So, so this is okay. We have discussed my first point. Second point is, I mean, it is one of the reasons what I think is happening is that a major part of the life of an academic in form of lecturer or reader in UK or assistant professor, associate professor, is to get good funds. I mean, having extramural funds is very important, not only to sustain, but to do research and to even for promotional purposes or making your presence known in the larger community of colleagues. It's very difficult to get big funds or attract big funds in anatomy. Apparently, for whatever reason, I'm not aware of many projects which are fundamentally anatomy project or even physiology projects that has succeeded, say, for example, big European grants. They're more inclining towards applied science, where you have to say that I will produce this drug that will cure this thing, or I will produce this biomaterial or something.
This is a big change. When I was a PhD student and a postdoc, individual departments had some funding for research. Not a lot of money, but if you wanted a few £100, even 1,000 or something, then it was available at the whim of the head of department, obviously. Also, there were technical staff who were very skilled. So they could help you. I mean, if you wanted to, there's always some histology you can do. There's always something you do.
Always.
With very little funds, if you have pairs of hands and a small amount of money, and there's a lab there. So if there's a histology lab, the alcohols, the clearing agents, the stains are present. You can do something. And that seems to disappear. Technicians have gone. Research technicians who are paid by the department have gone. And research technicians, this made life much more interesting for the technicians because they were teaching and research technicians. One minute they could be embalming the body, and the next they'd be helping for teaching, and the next they'd be helping in a research project.
So it was much more diverse.
Yes. So their job was much more interesting than being employed to do a single technique. When I joined St. Mary's as a junior lecturer, on the same day, a new junior technician joined. And he was sent to a technical college where technicians were trained for 1 day a week, and he rotated around everything that was done in the department to learn some light microscopy, to learn electron microscopy, to learn embalming, to do dissection, to learn some histology. And this training took 3 or 4 years.
And it came out of a kind of a process.
It came out of a process, yeah.
And I guess those days
fairly normal. And I remember when I moved to St. George's, I did a lot of electron microscopy, and the person running the imaging center went through the same process at University College. And his stories of that, it was like being in the army. He had to turn up in a jacket and tie at the beginning of the week. The chief technician would tell them what they were going to do for the week, and he had day release as well. And it was only at the end of the process, when you tried everything, you could begin to think about specializing in one particular skill. But if necessary, you could be called to do something else.
I guess this propensity towards zooming in too much in the name of specialization, probably that
I
mean, it has its merits, but sometimes also demerits, isn't it?
And I think that the teaching helps you to zoom out. In my later years at St. George's, when research was being focused on, and they appointed a number of tenure track positions where the people were protected from teaching is the word that was used, for 5 years, with the understanding they get their research going, and then after that, they would have to do some teaching. Well, it turned out to be a disaster because A, they didn't publish any more than normal lecturers who were doing the teaching. And when the 5 years were up, most of them left.
Yeah.
Yes.
But so I'm sure
this is the other side of teaching and research.
I'm pretty sure your observations, I'm not saying it can be generalized, but there are definitely certain elements of truth and trend, both inside it. But I guess that is how it will run, or that is how is the call of the day. At least that's what in policy documents I see being reflected. Now, also regarding the training, the teaching that I say, because you have spent all your life as part of some way of the pedagogy, and as you have also mentioned it clearly, that you have been active in teaching and research and never separated one from the other because you think they complement each other. I mean, nowadays
they overlap with BSc and PhD students.
Yes.
We're doing both at the same time with individuals who you have some interest and faith in.
Yeah. And by the way, these days I do see things that PhD students are always saying, oh, I have to do research, so I cannot come over and demonstrate. Again, it would be a nice comparison to see that students who are demonstrating and students who are not demonstrating, citing reasons of pending research and blah, 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 if it comes to pure output, whether they're different or there is a significant different or they're slightly different, or maybe actually they're trailing. I don't know. I will not be surprised.
The reason most people don't turn up in the dissecting room is that they haven't prepared.
Yeah.
And nobody likes to be shown that they don't know something. Yeah. And compared with, say, physiology, where you can always, in certain circumstances, it may be different. When somebody says, what is that? Either you know or you don't.
Yeah. And those are hard times.
And you've got to get used to not knowing and being honest about it and go away and find out. If you start digging a hole, it'll only get worse. It's very hard to say, I don't know, to start with, but it's definitely the best way.
Yes, and I can understand the pressure because in anatomy, I mean, in a mashed up body cadaver, the student finds something and say, okay, what is this? And that is a kind of a moment of truth. I mean, and because I'm teaching anatomy, coordinating modules for almost a decade now, including the hard times of the pandemic. I have seen that those are the times because say there is a demonstrator. The demonstrator can forward the student to somebody else, that somebody else can forward to me, but unfortunately, I cannot forward it to somebody. Of course, saying to a student that I don't know is not great. It can happen, but if it starts happening too many times, then it puts me rather in poor light as a lecturer.
But you don't just say you don't know. You say, I don't know.
I'll find it out.
And you must not just go away then. You've got to get back to those students.
Yes. And find the answer. But that means dedication and engagement and involvement. So it's not a feather walk. It takes engagement. But I think I have learned a lot. And because I was not an anatomist. My PhD is in nanomedicine. I did my own part of physics, chemistry, and medicine and toxicology. I became with kind of an accident that I was put into dissection hall and I thrived. And then I continued. But what I have seen is that having a good and solid anatomical knowledge is so much helpful in biomedical science, because at the end of the day, we are trying to solve problem in a machine, which is called vertebrate body. And knowing the machine is the first important thing to sort a problem inside it. Whereas these days, I think rather than knowing it, and there is a kind of a mentality growing that, oh, something somewhere will do it for us, and we just focus on the solutions rather than diverting from the problems itself. And that also brings to certain pedagogical things. For example, there is a lot of publications and these things are coming out about utility of social media, for example, in anatomy pedagogy and anything.
I think by and large, those people are avoiding the anatomy.
Yeah, and second thing is, I'm not saying there is a clear-cut thing or clear-cut kind of a dictum developing, but I see that there is a kind of a notion. I would call it arrogance, but kind of a notion that maybe in future with AI and all these things, we'll be able to even substitute dissection. There will be no dissection. There will be virtual dissection. There will be this and that. Do you think dissection is necessary and will be necessary in future? Or forever? I don't know. There is nothing forever probably, but in quite distant future, do you think dissection being replaced, or do you think dissection is going to stay if we are going to produce good doctors?
Do I think it's necessary? Yes, I do. At least for some of the body to get the hand skills, to understand depth, to understand things like superficial fascia.
Yes.
You've got to know where to go. Do I think it will continue? Not everywhere.
So what will replace it?
Very little, unfortunately. Because the places where it is being replaced are the places where they tend to have teaching only contracts of anatomy. So they're learning from the book, teaching from the book. Perhaps not in my lifetime, but I suspect in my lifetime within the UK, I would not be surprised that there's a two-tier training system for
already, or it's coming.
Well, I think it exists already, but officially.
Oh, okay. So
it's almost the barefoot doctor scenario, and there are those that do a full training who at the end can take a specialization. They're qualified to take a specialization in anything.
And I guess, I'm not putting a leading question to you, but I'm just trying to understand. I guess looking at your gestures, that probably you are also scared that this second tier will ultimately take over the first tier.
Well, I think there could well be more of them. Yes, absolutely. There is a shortage of general practitioners in parts of the country. And I think that's what the last two governments, this one and the one before, have been pushing for medicine in the community, which means more GPs. Physicians' assistants now it's a 2-year course. They're supposed to be supervised. They're not always supervised, as we found out from the press. And these people are already graduates. So that means they've already done 3 years. So they're doing another 2 years. Why not do 5 years in the first place?
These are difficult questions, and probably they have to answer you. But
the problem then becomes that all of in the UK, and it will be the same in Ireland, all of the traditional, for want of a better word, medical schools are actually full. They don't have lecture theatres that can accommodate more students. They don't have a dissecting room that can accommodate. Most of them are doing rotations anyway. The hospitals they're associated with can't take any more clinical students. So the new medical schools have to be somewhere where there hasn't already been a medical school, which means they probably don't have a well, they won't have a teaching pathology department. They don't have academic radiologists. So everything has to be started from scratch.
And probably that is not very possible knowing how cash-strapped NHS is already there. And probably many other healthcare systems in the world.
It is very popular in the regions where the new medical schools are, because the hospitals, which are district generals perhaps, can then say university hospital.
So cosmetically, they're great.
And there are private medical schools.
Yes.
And so I don't understand how that works. Well, I understand how it works. It works like, well, in your neck of the woods, RCSI, who can charge 45,000 euros a year to overseas students, and get students from Ireland who have grants from the government. That doesn't exist in the UK. It's all fee paying. Can you pay or can you not? Some of the students will be coming from overseas, from countries that don't have the capacity to train their own doctors. And if they're on a government scholarship, they're likely to be quite good students, and they will have to work for the government when they go back. But, other students may not be. The entrance requirements are certainly less than they are in universities that I'm used to working in.
So the entry to medical curriculum will not be exclusive to only because you are a brilliant student, probably. There will be much more things coming over, and that's...
We talk about being a brilliant student to do medicine. It's not the only difficult subject to get into.
Yeah.
I'm talking personally now. My son has no interest in anything biological or medical. He likes facts, and he's studying engineering. He was predicted to get 4A stars. He got 4A stars. He didn't get his first choice of university. And everybody he works with, the students in his university are 4A stars. That's higher than medicine in the UK.
I guess you're indicating towards also a grade inflation kind of thing, probably?
Oh, there's no doubt that there is grade inflation. When I started teaching, the standard offer in London was a B and 2 Cs.
Okay.
So there has been grade inflation, but also schools are teaching to the test much more. And perhaps the students are working harder to pass the test. But do I think the students are better prepared now than they were 30 odd years ago, or brighter and more capable? No. In some ways, they're less capable because they're less flexible.
And probably in future, we will be differentiating between 99.9999 and 99.99999%, which I don't know how will be measured, but if the grade inflation continues like this, and in my teaching sphere, I'm equally affected by that, but I don't know.
Skills, they're much worse. Again, in the dissecting room this morning, there were a lot of adhesions in the abdominal cavity. Well, I said, look, these are old people. Some of them have had procedures, etc. Everybody's had infections. Things stick together. You must have dissected a rat, a young rat, and taken the gut tube out and spread it out on the table, and everything just comes apart. Not a single person on that table had dissected an animal at A level. Done everything from an earthworm, then a locust, then a dogfish for the branchial arches, then a rat, and those were the official things. And one of the biology teachers lived slightly in the country, so would come in with a piglet from a local farmer So only one between the group, but we would do that, except for a bit of roadkill. So we were handling a scalpel and forceps. And
so humans were the final animal to be dissected in your curriculum, but you have started with even invertebrates.
Absolutely.
And I don't think that is there anymore.
No.
I don't think, and I'm pretty sure it's not like that. It has become way more theoretical, I'm pretty sure.
Within the table that I was teaching this morning, some of the students had not done any dissection of anything, and those that had, they had only dissected an eyeball and a heart, which came from the butchers.
Interesting.
And the first I dissected a heart was to cook it. So you found out about the internal skeleton around the valves.
Yes.
But you had to take that away because it's inedible, and all you eat is the muscular ventricles.
In fact, that might be a better reason to teach them again, that you can make some good food out of it and it's edible, but I don't think it's going to come back. Now, I have final two segments. Number one, I would like to have your opinion, and I would just as an anatomist, on interesting tissue or interesting topic. When I teach embryology to students, and we talk a lot about how the fetus develops and it finally goes. And in fact, then I teach, of course, we talk about Y chromosome and how it expresses after, say, 6 weeks average, depends on the species. But apparently before the Y chromosome is active and it produces this SRY gene, apparently the fetus or the embryo that is there, that doesn't have a sex. I mean, it's indeterminate. It's not determined yet. What kind of a state it is? I'm trying to envision in my mind. I mean,
well, the Y chromosome alone is not sufficient. Fetal testosterone has to be present for the masculinization of the genitalia.
Yeah, but so this testosterone, isn't it coming from Y chromosome, or it has to some chromosomal or some genetic trigger? Otherwise,
what the trigger for the release of that is, I don't know. But it certainly can be triggered by high maternal testosterone.
Maternal testosterone. So that means female animals also have, or female species also have.
There's a degree of testosterone, obviously, in females, as we have estrogens.
And that is what I tell to my students, and they get like, okay, that's a new information and sometimes striking information. So if I understand well, there are no complete males or females, or if I just go by endocrinal profile.
By endocrine profile, I would say almost certainly not. And if you look at the development of the external genitalia, virtually everything in the female is present
as a male homologue.
The male. The only thing that is different, almost apart from size, is the fact that the urethra does not pass through the spongy part of the clitoris. It's below it. But there are primates in which it does.
So it shows that probably this classification over gender, or shall I say sex, or sex class differentiation, that happened at a later stage, and probably sex is very plastic, sex is very flexible. And if I may use the word gender a bit loosely, then there is a lot of flexibility here, isn't it?
It is a big problem using the word gender loosely and sex loosely. Sex is a biological phenomenon.
Yes, that is what I tried to mention.
It's a social construct.
You
have male genitalia and live as a woman, if you wish.
And that is absolutely fine.
What goes on in the masculinization of the brain or the feminization of the brain is a different topic altogether.
Yes.
And there are some sexually dimorphic parts of the hypothalamus, for example, but there's a lot of information. There is a lot published about masculinization or feminization of the brain, which is not very good science. So,
yeah, but in our manuscript, which we published in Journal of Anatomy, we have also given some very good examples from animal world, where, for example, for those fishes that a male fish can convert into a female fish. And we have given those examples that in certain reptilian species, it depends on the temperature where the eggs were laid and kept, actually, that whether the offsprings will come out on or which kind of, it will be male or female. So there are a lot of things. I mean, there is nothing called absolute masculinity or probably absolute femininity.
And there is selection further down the line. I worked on young chicks at one stage, and there's different sexes come out at a different part of the hatch.
Yes.
And so either end of the hatch, which I think from my memory tends to be male, that can be problematic if something goes wrong. If the hatch hasn't started and the female isn't sitting on them, those may not hatch, and the rump end might not. So I think that's not whether they're male or female, but it's whether they hatch or not. But as you say, with crocodiles, it is temperature dependent. It depends where they are within the cluster of the eggs.
So it means our environment has a lot to say in how we sustain and in our lifetimes, and probably that's a good thing, because probably that's what I proudly say to my students, that as an anatomist, I understand that how equal we are, rather than when we look into the world where people are being pitted once against each other. Probably it is a kind of a spiritual subject as well. It shows that
the variation
we are very similar.
Is a very wide continuum.
It's a very wide continuum.
The point you made earlier, what you asked me about, is dissection necessary? Well, if you're using programs like Complete Anatomy or Primal Pictures Anatomy TV, that just shows what a textbook shows, which represents everybody and nobody.
Yes.
The dissecting room, when there are 20 people, then you really see something. Somebody I was working with today was actually doing a demonstration on clinical anatomy. He showed me something on his phone. He said, "Have a look at this chest X-ray. What do you see?" It's a 16-year-old. And I looked at it, and well, lungs are very very black, so that they're very healthy. I can see the vessels. Nice diaphragm, even on both sides, pretty much. And anything strange? And I just looked at him, and I looked at him, and I said, "There's no heart."
Oh.
Then he showed me the next image. I have never seen a heart in the abdomen before. And this
person very rare.
Was clinically healthy. No problem.
That shows we are in a continuum.
If we are definitely in a continuum.
Many things can happen. Many things. Because in my clinical life, I have seen cases where there is situs inversus. That means everything has changed sides. But heart in abdomen? No.
In the dissecting room, I saw a right subclavian coming off the descending aorta.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a separate common carotid on each side. And we were just looking for this subclavian. We had to take the lungs out to get behind them to find it. I'd never seen that before. So, a good surgeon or radiologist doesn't say it's not there. They know where to look for something.
Yes.
And they keep going until they find it, because something will be there.
So what you are saying is like Hamlet. There are more things in anatomy than are written in your textbooks, Horatio, isn't it?
So, what I saw today. I mean, and of course, then the next question was, in those X-rays, it didn't show what were the great vessels doing? If the heart itself was in the abdomen, how long?
Yeah, and the interesting bit is this type of rather, I will call anomalous cases, they're often without any symptoms. They're living a happy life.
This person was a 16-year-old who was asymptomatic. And then you start, about the migration, because the things like the phrenic and the pericardium, they come down with the heart. Was all of that in the...
I think, as I said, I have already booked you for my second season of podcast. And I think this will be a very good starting point to have a kind of a follow-up on this case, because I have never heard cases with abdominal heart. I mean, like...
Unfortunately, we're going to have to wait a long time before we can...
Oh, okay. But we're hopeful, because this is interesting.
High quality MRI, if the machine has got the time, we could put it through and look at it.
Don't you think you should, or maybe this should be reported in medical journals as a case report? It's a possibility. It's interesting, very interesting.
Case reports, but I think it would be publishable if it was done on thin section MRI and a complete...
then it will be very, very, and we can get a lot of information about the heart itself, isn't it? And how it is working. Maybe some Doppler, and we can see if the blood flow is well, and the cardiovascular system, how is it working. I'm pretty sure the patient is not suffering from anemia or something, or hypoxia, something, but it seems fine if everything is going well.
Another question, I mean, you don't know where to start asking the questions, because of all of the other things that descend. What about the thymus? The thymus.
You open up a Pandora's box, basically.
I mean, it just keeps on going.
Keep going. Professor Davies, I will come. Yeah.
What's the length of the left recurrent laryngeal nerve?
I don't remember it right now. Do you remember the length of the recurrent laryngeal nerve?
No, but it's if.
Oh, yeah. So
it's the laryngeal function like with the nerve being stretched.
It must be a meter or so. I don't know.
I don't know.
It's a remarkable thing. Okay, I'll follow up on that. Hopefully, if there is ever any news, please let me know. And I'll come to the last segment. I told you that I'll ask you certain questions. Question is very fun. That is, I will name you certain very important persons, not always from anatomy, but they are from anatomy often, or from biology or physiology or medicine. And my question is, if you could meet these guys, maybe you have not, maybe you have met, but I don't think you have met these guys, and you could ask them a question, what would you ask them? So my first guest for you is, and this was my test case also already, if you could meet Charles Darwin, what would you ask him?
I would ask him, would he have been... Well, there wouldn't be one question, but my theory with Charles Darwin is that the pressures are not just Charles Darwin. The people that we know from his generation, and probably in the 19th century, the rest of it, 20th century, people like, as a neuroanatomist, Ramon Santiago y Cajal is a bit of a hero of mine. Mm-hmm. He didn't publish many pictures, but he published 2 very big books in a whole career. Did they have the time to think that perhaps we don't have now? Because we have to produce.
So we have become numbers.
Neither of these 2 people, Charles Darwin or Cajal, had students in the same way that we have now.
So you think the space for intellectual shape or scholastic thought process that space has become much shrunk and probably doesn't exist too much now anyway.
And they were allowed to think about things that interested them, not about what was fashionable at the time or the areas of research which were grant funded, etc.
Interesting.
So that is a bit of a luxury.
That's
whether it's
quite a bit
or not.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
The second question, I would be very interested to ask Charles Darwin is more of a social question, because it's quite clear he was formulating the ideas of natural selection well before it was published. What was it? Social pressure that stopped him? The idea of what people would think the church, in the UK, the Church of England is an established church. We have apparently a national religion with the monarch being head of the church. Whether that's better than having a pope or not, I'm not sure. But I tend to think it probably is. It's like divorcing the practitioners from the head of the institution, a bit like having a constitutional monarch who, the moment they actually exercise power, will not be the head of state anymore, and having a president who, as we have down seen, has executive power.
Interesting. So you're merging a little bit of politics with anatomy and interference from religion, if that happens. Did it affect Charles Darwin?
I think, we live in the world. It's what's happening outside does affect what we do.
We are pretty much embedded within the fabric of the society, so we cannot say no to everything that is happening.
I've worked with experimental animals. We're working with human bodies. We are the first place that most students meet the idea of ethics as applied to medicine.
Absolutely. Very good. Now I have my second guest for you. What would you ask? What would you ask to Henry Gray, the famed writer or the initial drafter of the Gray's Anatomy? Is there any question you would like to ask?
Obviously, Henry Gray is an important figure in anatomy, and the fact that he put stuff into one book with illustrations from his illustrator is very important. But I would like to know what his lineage was. Who did he respect? Because I can almost see a lineage coming from John Hunter.
Yeah, you're right.
St. George's to Henry Gray.
So you would like to know if John Hunter was an influence on Henry Gray?
Yes, because I don't think any of us work in a vacuum.
Good.
We're standing on the shoulders of people who've come before. And unfortunately, with people not only looking at stuff on the internet now, it's rather frequent that I see the anatomical world wheel being reinvented at meetings.
Very, very interesting.
Because people are not au fait with historical documents. If you're making an anatomical description and you published it in an early issue of the Journal of Anatomy and Physiology, and it was correct then, it will be correct now. It will not be superseded.
Yes.
Okay. And so I do go back to early descriptions. And in fact, only last week, I had a query from somebody in Germany searching for an anatomical collection from there, which actually was bought by, I think we'll find out, by University College London at its inception to start off an anatomical museum. And I was going through the medical gazette of the 1820s.
Yes. Yes.
Information about that. And it was amazing because the Wellcome has now put it all online.
Yes, you're right.
I found the answer I wanted within a very short time.
Very good. Your next guest is a duo. So it's not one person. And from Cambridge, Watson and Crick. What would you ask them?
I was suspicious and say, did you prefer Green King, IPA, or Abbott?
I'm pretty sure they would have an honest answer for it.
They would have, and certainly Watson would have had an honest answer. But I think it's really important what they did, because I think they also had some time to think, because they didn't do the work themselves. They did it in the Eagle. Now, I've done quite a lot of work on the neuropathology of Alzheimer's disease, both in human material and in animal models. And the amount of publications that have come out about the neuropathology of Alzheimer's disease, God, are we any closer to understanding it? I don't think we are at the moment. The genetics is a clue, but that doesn't affect everybody. And I've seen transgenic mice with amyloid throughout the brain that are behaving almost normally. My thesis is that whoever solves the Alzheimer problem will not be in a lab going down a very narrow hole. They'll be sitting in the Eagle talking with some like-minded people, and then the light bulb moment will happen. It will be bringing it together, not publishing in one domain, that will do it.
Fantastic. Your next guest is again from Cambridge. Everyone knows him. He's perhaps one of, if not the best brain that has been attributed to a Briton, Isaac Newton. What would you ask him if you have to ask him? Or you will be just awestruck, so you will not be in a position to ask anything.
And he had time and money. He had lots of different positions. He was a bit of an entrepreneur, which could be...
Yeah. He was also taking care of the Royal Mint Service. I think.
He was the head of the Royal Mint. He did work for the Royal Navy, which was a great grant funder in those days before they...
Yes.
A bit like the Office for Naval Research in the States now. Mm-hmm. So it would be, how did he... I would like to know how he managed to do these things, or did he just use his position in the Mint, etc., to fund what he was really interested in?
Yeah, I think
life and gravity, and I'm sure he didn't sit under the apple tree, what they still say exists in Christ's College, but it's a nice story.
It's a nice story, and stories are important.
How he partitioned his work, and did he actually use the money to do what he was interested in?
In fact, he was in politics. He won elections, which is never easy in England. It's a different story, though, that as far as I know, he never spoke out in Westminster.
Can you remember which constituency
I don't. No, I don't remember it right now, but
because
I think it was where he was from, something like that. I might be wrong. I'm just throwing stones on dark, but he was not a very good politician, though. I mean, he hardly talked, apparently, in Parliament.
But I mean, the universities of Oxford and Cambridge in those days actually had their own members of Parliament.
Yeah.
Sent them to not representing the people of the constituency. They were
constituency. That has changed.
In England at that time, and Wales, there were only 2 universities.
Yeah. Maybe, I mean, you are the guest, so I'm just asking you if I would meet Isaac Newton, I would ask him rather a fun question that, why was he so upset with Robert Hooke? and
we know that in all of these important characters from the past, if we still know them, they did something important.
Yeah.
And professional jealousies existed then, as they exist
No.
But there are certain nexuses of people that, I don't know, there are environments where people come from. Why, for example, in Vienna at the turn of the century, was there Alzheimer, crippling? That's where Freud did his basic training.
Yeah, that's what I
And
was
there
thinking.
are others. And I think the reason is that they had a good basic training and people went there because they were interested in the subject. So they weren't neuroanatomists or psychiatrists or pathologists. They did it all. They wanted to know about the function of the brain.
So do you think it's time to go back to polymaths rather than specialists? In research especially?
I think it certainly does help, which brings us back to the teaching.
Yeah, teaching and research.
Teach the whole body, but you only research on one thing. It does broaden you. And we must start thinking about just the anatomy. Because if I'm just taking from my desk now, I don't know whether you can see.
Yeah, I can see that.
That is a coaster from the Anatomical Society, with the badge of the society, the arms of the society on it, and the motto, ex conformatione usus, and that's the motto of the society, which I'm very proud of because Clive Lee and I came up with it when we designed it, is from structure comes function. And it's always the dig at physiologists, because in my early years, we were constantly being told, you can't teach that, it's function.
Yeah. I guess that rivalry of affiliation and rivalry of structure and function, well, I mean, it will continue.
Well, but not quite in the same way, because although there are anatomists who will teach the entire body, when I was a student, all of the physiologists could do that as well, in terms of general systems physiology. And now I only do renal or respiratory or whatever.
It has become much more compartmentalized. Which
is a shame, because it used to be a bit of fun to spar with.
Yes, definitely a bit of fun. My last thing, it is last person's, they're again from Cambridge, but not very famous, and they're definitely not scientists as far as I know. But just for fun to end it, the Cambridge Five. If you're a spy thriller guy, so you must know them. In England, they are infamous. Yes. Would you ask them anything?
Well, or just get away? Something.
It lost.
Their papers have been released, government papers, because this is the 30-year rule. There's been a bit of fuss with Blunt.
Yeah, Blunt, yeah.
That's why that the Queen had been told well before she was officially told. And so when she was told, she just shrugged her shoulders and said, yes. So what? The interesting thing about that group is two things. They are at a particular time in the 20th century after the war, and they were particularly idealistic in their ideas of what communism could be and should be. So when they were active as spies, they were still idealistic. When they got caught, they saw what happened, how it had been misused for good. So obviously they were, covering it up. But I think what I would like to know is not about them, but who knew, for how long, and why did it take so long for it to come out, because I'm sure there were a lot of people who knew.
I think we have given enough material for the next James Bond movie script. Or at least a spy thriller. And Professor Davies, it is always exhilarating to talk to you, and we can continue forever. But we have to call it a day for somewhere. We have had 2 episodes, and I always wanted to end season 1 with you, with your interview, because I know there is so much to know, so much to dig more, and this conversation can go on, because it's, as you said, anatomy is not different from life, society, and it's very interesting to look into from that perspective, through that lens, through that prism, actually. But we have to call it a day, as I said, and 2 episodes. But next season, I will definitely come out with some more important topics, probably more focused, for example, like sleep or mental health, and how anatomical knowledge can at least give us some indication, or what have been your take-home message, because there are a lot of things that are our perceptions or perspectives, but they are still not strong enough that we can publish it somewhere. But at least you are a no-nonsense person. So at least if after so much of experience, if you have something, at least what you think, I think that will be certainly valuable for the future generations. And not everything can be captured in journals.
But yes, journals. I suppose there are journals and there are magazines. I think that a journal are very important for justified fact.
Yes.
But speculation based on feeling, I think it has a role. In good newspapers, for example, in the Daily Telegraph, there's a clear distinction between factual reporting and opinion pieces.
Yes.
As long as that distinction holds, I think it's fine to publish ideas. Absolutely.
Yes. And that's where probably the excitement is, because experiments are done, if probably with a lot of SOPs, but ideas don't follow SOPs, they just come.
Yeah. And in an ideal world, if somebody has an idea, they will also have ideas for how the idea can be tested.
Could be, yes.
And if not now, what do we need to know? What facilities do we need to be able to do that? Because I'm a strong believer in the experimental method, Karl Popper, the logical scientific discovery. You can never actually prove something is true, absolutely, but you can prove it isn't.
Yes, and that is
the black swan analogy. All swans are white. If you keep on finding white swans, doesn't mean that they are all white. The moment you find a black one, you know they're not all white.
Thank you, Professor Davies. Thanks a lot.